get lunch or when they're going to get lunch. So we're going to order lunch because they will be deliberating at lunchtime. Anything else?
Judge, someone mentioned yesterday, and they may. Judge, someone mentioned yesterday, and they may remember. I don't remember if you all rested.
No, I'm going to allow. I'm going to allow you to rest. Absolutely, I appreciate that. So when they come in, I'll say, "Is there anything else from the state?" Allow you to rest, and then I'll read them the introductory instruction. So let's bring them in.
Ready, Judge?
We are ready.
All rise. Jury entering.
Jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at the time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. Welcome back and happy Friday. First, before we begin today, my normal question: has anybody done any research related to the case, discussed the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, or been exposed to any reports about the case outside of the courtroom? By show of hands. All right, let the record reflect there are no hands. I have a couple of things I'm going to let you know, but first I'm going to ask the state if there's anything else in their rebuttal case.
No, Judge, the state rests its rebuttal case.
All right, state having rested their rebuttal case, ladies and gentlemen, the next stage of the proceedings, as you may recall from the preliminary instructions I gave you, is the closing arguments of the attorneys, which they are going to do in just a moment. I have gone ahead and indicated to the bailiffs that they are to order you lunch because you will be deliberating during lunchtime today. So we're going to provide you lunch. Don't get too excited. It's probably just sandwiches from the counter over here. But we will provide you lunch. I only regret not telling you that yesterday so that if you all bring in lunch, you didn't bring it in. But we will provide you lunch in the jury room during deliberations. So I just wanted to let you know that. I do have one brief instruction that I will read to you before the attorneys begin their closing arguments, and it is as follows. Both the state and the defendant have now rested their case. The attorneys now will present their final arguments. Please remember that what the attorneys say is not evidence or your instruction on the law. However, do listen closely to their arguments. They are intended to aid you in understanding the case. Each side will have equal time, but the state is entitled to divide this time between an opening argument and a rebuttal argument after the defense has given its closing argument. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Derry, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. May it please the court, counsel, Ms. Nachman. Good morning. I shot them. I shot Mom and Bob. I didn't think I could do it. I shot Bob. We are here today because of Nicole Nachman's words and actions between August the 18th and August the 20th of 2015. She had no reason at all to kill Robert Deans, but for the fact that he stood in the way of her fully executing the trap that she was setting for her mother. When Nicole Nachman made the choice to kill Robert Deans and Miriam Deans, she did so in a way that equates to first-degree premeditated murder. And ultimately, the state is asking that you follow the oath that you took as jurors and that you apply the law that His Honor is going to give you. Apply that to the evidence that you have heard during these 2 weeks of trial, and that you find Ms. Nachman guilty of 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. His Honor is going to give you all of the instructions that apply in this case. And ultimately, you will receive 2 jury instructions as to murder in the first degree. One for Robert Deans and one for Miriam Deans. What I want to focus on in this instruction is the definition as to premeditation. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass before the premeditated intent to kill and the actual killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow only reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you and the evidence that you have been presented. It will be sufficient proof of premeditation if the circumstances of the killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. So let's talk about those actions. Let's talk about how we get here to the ultimate conclusion of premeditated murder. It starts on August the 18th. On August the 18th of 2015, we know that Miriam Deans checked into a hotel in Jacksonville, Florida. You've heard testimony that Miriam Deans was a captain in the Navy and that she regularly traveled as a part of her job. She regularly was gone for various periods of time away from her Carrollwood home. On August the 18th, she checked into a hotel in Jacksonville, leaving her husband, Robert Deans, and her daughter, Nicole Nachman, at their Carrollwood home in Tampa. We know that at some point on August the 18th, Robert Deans went to Publix, went to China Walk, and went to Pet Boys. We know through a video that's been introduced into evidence that somewhere around 8 o'clock on August the 18th, 8 o'clock in the evening, is one of the last times Robert Deans is seen alive. We know from the testimony of the neighbors that Robert Deans is not seen after sometime that day. So sometime between August the 18th at 8 o'clock in the evening and August the 19th at roughly 9 o'clock in the evening, Nicole Nachman makes the decision to go into the home and obtain what is believed to be, what I believe the evidence has shown to be, a .380 caliber pistol, Robert Deans' own gun. And then at some time on that day, between that day and the following day, there is no struggle. And kills Robert Deans execution style with one bullet to the back of his head, right through his ball cap. We know Robert Deans collapses, whether he's in a chair or standing up, and the result of the collapsing is he breaks several ribs. We know from the testimony again that there was no struggle involved. Those are the only injuries to Robert Deans. And then it begins. After Nicole Nachman has executed the first step in her plan to trap her mother and kill her mother, she's got to work on continuing the plan and cleaning it up so that her mother can walk right into it with no knowledge of what's happened to Robert. So what does Nicole Nachman do? She begins the cleanup process. We know that there's a bottle of bleach in the garage right near the laundry room. We know that there is extensive efforts taken to clean this home. If you recall the testimony of Shelby Garman, the crime scene technician, where was the blood? The phenolphthalein test indicated positive results for the couch, the recliner, the sink faucet, the sponge, various places in the kitchen, the mop bucket. She uses all of these things to clean up as best she can. There's blood on the walls, blood on the refrigerator. And what did FDLE later tell you? That blood on the refrigerator is Robert Dean's blood. That blood on the kitchen floor is Robert Dean's blood. She's cleaning. She's using whatever she is, the sponge, the mop bucket, the bleach, to eliminate any sign of the execution that she's just performed. In the process of this, she has to make the decision to drag Robert Dean's 6'3", 215-pound body into the back bedroom. She's going to drag it through the house into a bedroom, wrap it in blankets, wrap it in a comforter, close the door and lock it. Continue her cleanup. And in the process, she leaves a bloody fingerprint on the wall. Because what did the evidence show you? That fingerprint on the wall was Nicole Nachman's, and a swab from that same location, according to Miss Sutton from FDLE, was positive for blood. Almost invisible to the naked eye. But Miss Garman is able to see it and enhance it with Amido Black and discover the bloody thumbprint that she left behind during her cleanup. What else did she do when she cleaned up? She put laundry in. The plaid shirt that Robert Deans is wearing in the Publix video is found wet in the washing machine. The blue and white Titleist hat that Robert Deans is wearing when he's killed with one gunshot to the back of the head is being washed in the washing machine. She's making active decisions to clean up any trace of the murder that she just committed. Sometime between August 18th and August 19th, again at approximately 9 o'clock, these are the actions of Ms. Nachman. And so it continues. On August the 19th of 2015, Ms. Nachman makes a call to Florida State. Find out what's going on with her housing. Because remember, Nicole Nachman has Florida prepaid. Her dormitory housing has already been paid for. She just has to get it lined up. And no, she hasn't done it yet. She's late. So she makes a call to find out what's going on with her housing. They tell her we don't have a space yet. And then soon after, very soon after, at approximately 11:30 on August the 19th, the evidence has shown that she receives an email from Jessica Gilbert at Florida State. You got your housing. We have a spot for you. At 11:30 on August the 19th, some almost 20 hours before she kills her mother, she gets her housing. So she gets her housing. And what does she do? Mom's still not there. Mom's still in Jacksonville. So Nicole Nachman on her own. Stepdad is dead. She now takes the contract that they sent her. She fills it out, puts her phone number, her Gmail email address on there, puts her mom as the contact person. She fills it out. She's getting ready to send it back in. She knows she also has to obtain a deposit. She can't ask Robert because he's dead. And she can't ask her mother because she's planning to kill her. So she goes to her cousin David Lear's house. She goes to David's house, and at this point, in Nicole Nachman's mind, she's so aware of what she plans to do, she's telling David, can I borrow the money? No problem. Thank you. Gets the money. Hugs him goodbye. He thinks it's a little strange, you know. She really wants to hug goodbye. It's not necessarily what they always do. She makes it a point to say goodbye to him. And then what else does she tell him? He says, when am I going to see you again? When are we going to see you again? Oh, probably around Thanksgiving, the next natural break or holiday for a college student. That's what she tells him. Lies. So she gets the money from him. She then goes, she takes that money, she deposits it into a bank, sends it to Florida State, and approximately 5 o'clock on August the 19th, after 5 p.m., because Ms. Gilbert testified she didn't receive it till the next day, after 5 p.m. on August the 19th, she sends back her contract to confirm her housing at Florida State. Now the contract's in, her housing's set up. There is nothing at all preventing Nicole Nachman, now that she submitted her contract, from getting in her car and driving to Florida State. Only thing preventing her is that she hasn't followed through on her plan to kill her mother. So she waits. She stays at the house. At some point between August the 19th and August the 20th of 2015, Nicole Nachman makes a phone call to her mother. We heard testimony that they talk, and she tells him something about having talked to her roommates that she's going to be meeting. And then what else do we know happens on August the 20th? Well, at some point on August the 20th, Nicole Nachman has the forethought in her mind to think, I've killed Robert about a day ago now. Mom's probably wondering where he is. I'm going to check his email. She has the forethought to think, I need to go into Robert Dean's email account, Yahoo email account, so that I can check and see if Mom's trying to reach him, because he's not answering the phone because he's dead in the bedroom. So she goes onto his email account. And her internet history, her search history, it's all in evidence. How to change a password on Yahoo. Nicole Nachman has a Gmail account. The evidence has shown. How to change that password on Yahoo. And then what do we see? We see an email forwarded to her that was an email from Miriam Deans to Robert Deans trying to reach you. Your phone's going to voicemail. So these are thoughts in her mind. I need to do this, to check this email, to make sure that I try and get my mom here without suspecting anything wrong. She replies to the email, forwards the email to her account, and we know that at some point on that same day in the afternoon, Elizabeth Ray sees Nicole Nachman at that home doing something by her window. We know that Nicole Nachman remains at that home in Carrollwood until approximately 5:53, when her Garmin GPS unit inside of her car shows that the car is now at a park approximately 1.5 miles north of her home, and the Garmin GPS unit is now turned off at 5:53 p.m. So again, this entire time, now at almost 6 o'clock, on August the 20th, Nicole Nachman, following through on her plan, coming from that park back to her home in Carrollwood, about 1.5 miles away, always keeping the gun the whole time, never knowing when her mom's actually going to walk in, but waiting for her. Even though she's told her family she's going back to school, has got her housing at Florida State, and mom's hours away in Jacksonville, waits for her to come back because she's got to follow through with her plan. So what happens next? Well, we know Nicole at some point is sitting in the family room watching a movie that's paused when law enforcement arrives, eating a bag of Cheetos that's sitting there on the couch, open. Lights are all on in the house. No signs of a struggle obvious to law enforcement. No signs of blood immediately obvious to law enforcement. Done a great job of cleaning it up so that when mom walks in the door, puts her purse and her keys down, no reason to suspect anything's wrong. And at that point, Nicole Nachman, still with the gun in her hand, the same gun that she used 24 hours ago to kill her stepfather, with the same gun in her hand, puts 3 bullets in her mother. She doesn't miss, because there's 3 shell casings found at the scene, and there's 3 projectiles recovered from Miriam Deans. Torso, abdomen, neck. Puts 3 bullets in her mom with no issue. And then she gets in her car, she leaves to go to her car because remember her car's not there because had it been there, her mother would have known that she was still home. So her car couldn't be there in order for her plan to work. So she now walks or runs the distance to her car, somewhere between 9:30 and 10 o'clock at night. And the next thing that we know is that at 10:19 p.m. on Thursday, August 20th, her Garmin GPS starts back up and she drives to Tallahassee. Mom's dead, Robert's dead, her plan's been followed through on, now she can go live her life. So she drives to Tallahassee. The phone records and the GPS coordinates document that at some point she stops at rest areas for some period of time, perhaps to sleep, continues her drive. And at approximately 8:15, 8:20 the next morning, Nicole Nachman gets a call from Detective Messer. Starting to call the family, starting to put the pieces together, figure out what's going on. We've talked a lot during this trial about the words of Nicole Nachman, about the things Nicole Nachman has said to experts in interviews after this offense, years after this offense in some cases. We've heard a lot about the different things Nicole Nachman said. What does Nicole Nachman say to Detective Messer less than 12 hours after she kills her mother? We know this phone call is at approximately 8:20, 8:30 in the morning, less than 12 hours after she puts 3 bullets in her mother. What does Nicole Nachman say to Detective Messer? What is her voice? What does she sound like? What is her thought process? Let's listen.
Is this Nikki?
Yeah.
Nikki, this is Detective Messer. I'm with the Sheriff's Office in Hillsborough County. I'm surprised actually that you answered. Are you okay?
I just got a call from my uncle.
Okay, and I was just going to tell you, I called spoke to your uncle and spoke to your grandmother, and I wanted to make sure you're okay, obviously, but I guess your uncle told you what's happened?
Can you drive her to the hospital?
Well, she's not doing very well, but I needed to talk to you. If you had said that you had been staying at your grandmother's house, I guess...
Yeah, I do that sometimes, but I'm in Tallahassee.
Oh, are you?
I've been here for, a day or two or so.
A day or two or so?
Yeah, because I have school,
When is...
Tuesday and Monday.
Okay. Well, is there any way I can meet you up there and talk to you? I need to show some pictures to you. And it's got to be done by the immediate next of kin. In fact, I meant to do this beforehand, but can you confirm your social security number with me?
Sure.
So I know. Person. But you're not driving right now or anything like that. You're...
Actually, no offense, I am.
Oh, are you? Okay. Well, that's fine. I mean, I just want you to get to
What hospital? I'm kind of like, I'm on campus, I don't know the area that well, over the campus.
Okay. Well, do you know your address or where you're staying?
Yes, I'm at the Smith building, I have to Google the address for you. Well, so I don't, you know,
Okay.
the streets on, so I have to more narrow and they don't really,
So,
should I just do my quick, I think, do a second?
yeah, that's fine. Call me right back though, if you could, because,
Do you know what hospital she goes?
no, I don't actually. Are you on campus right now driving around or?
Yeah, I'm on campus.
I really need you to get to your dorm, and sit tight and then call me back, okay?
Alright then.
Alright, I'll wait right for your call.
Okay.
Alright, thanks.
So what does she say in that phone call with Detective Messer? I'm in Tallahassee. Oh, are you? Is his statement. Are you in Tallahassee? And what does she say? Oh, yeah, I've been here a day or two. Did he ask her how long she'd been there? She volunteers it. I've been here a day or two. Because in Nicole Nachman's mind, she now knows law enforcement's involved. Law enforcement has discovered the deaths of my mother and stepfather. They're involved. I've got to start working. I'm in Tallahassee. Is she actually? No, she's not. She lies. I'm in the Smith building. She knows what building she's going to be staying in, or she thinks she's going to be staying in. Tells him things, asks him questions. Is she in the hospital? What hospital? Having a conversation with him, responding to his questions, asking him questions back, continuing her plan. So after that, Nicole Nachman is now well aware that the police are involved and that the police are working and doing their investigation. So what is the next thing she does? The next phone call is to Eric Lear. Soon after, let's listen to what she says in this call, still less than 12 hours after the death of her mother.
Hey, Nikki,
That's right, yeah?
did you call the detective?
Yeah, I left a voicemail with the address.
Oh, the address? Okay.
Yeah.
What's the address?
It's 78, Chieftain Way.
Right, 78 Chieftain Way?
Yeah,
Is that like Chief and T-A-N?
yeah,
Chieftain Way?
in Tallahassee.
Tallahassee.
313.
Okay. Well, so you haven't talked to him yet?
Oh, well, I talked to him when he called me, and well, you called me first, and then he called,
Right.
and then I told him that I was gonna give him the address because I parked somewhere else, and then I walk around to get into my room, kind of thing, and so it's kind of like I didn't know the actual address, and I have to keep looking up Sally's address for when I was living in Sally building, but I live in Smith building now.
You live in Smith building now? Hey, so you don't even know what's going on?
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, because he called me back, and he said that your mom, is gone. That apparently something happened to your mom and she's passed away. Are you there, Nikki? Nikki?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But he's making us, listen to me. Are you okay?
Yeah.
He's making it sound like you were involved or something. How long have you been there? Oh, you didn't leave on Wednesday like you told Grandma?
No, because Mom was kind of mad at Grandma.
Oh, when was the last time you were at your mom's, so?
I left late on I left really late on, I think, the 19th or something.
Like, you mean Wednesday you left there?
Yeah, I left like really late.
Was it Tuesday or Wednesday, Nikki?
It was the 19th,
The 19th for sure? Or what time you left? Did you leave about?
maybe 6 or 7.
What, at night?
Yeah, I was gonna go later, but, I'm gonna take it earlier, but I didn't.
Okay. Did you need a plane ticket or what's going on?
I don't know, I'm gonna let the detective come.
You can let him come up there?
Yeah,
Okay, are you gonna be at that address?
yes I am.
Okay, well, you better talk to Nikki, because I don't know what's going on, so, hold on, let me see if Grandma wants to talk to you, hold on a second. Are you alone, Nikki?
Well, I'm outside.
I know, but are you alone?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, because the detective told me he thinks somebody hurt your mom intentionally. Are you listening?
Yeah, I mean, Mom does have, Mom doesn't get along with, as many people as you think.
Well, who do you think would have a reason to hurt her?
I don't know, she's always having problems with people at work, she said.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, he keeps with Bob, they're always at each other's throat, and,
Are you okay?
yeah, I'm fine. I mean, no, I'm not.
Okay, so you sure the last time you were there was Wednesday?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I just want to make sure that you caught him, because he needs to talk to you, Nikki. You know what I'm saying?
I called him after the message.
I don't want to believe it, you know what I'm saying? But they're making it sound like you're involved somehow. You're not, are you, Nikki?
No,
You sure?
I'm sure.
You're not dating somebody or...
No, I don't even have a boyfriend.
Anyway. Well, I just want to make sure, because, it looks... I don't, we want to help you, but, you got to be straight with us at least and tell us, if anything happened over there. So you left Wednesday at 6 p.m. for sure?
Yeah, 6.
And you went straight to Tallahassee, or where are you?
I'm in Tallahassee.
Okay. I think you're in Brooks, and you're supposed to go to school in Brooksville.
Brooksville. I don't know.
Where's your school at?
Tallahassee.
Okay, well, I didn't know that. Oh, Florida State, okay. I thought you said Brooksville or Gainesville.
No, I never said Brooksville. I mean, I took all the maps and stuff.
All right, well, listen, that detective told me that you haven't called him back. So you sure you called the number I gave you?
I gave you, yeah.
And you heard his name on the voicemail?
No, I did.
How long ago was that message?
Maybe 30 minutes, 10 minutes, I don't know.
And what'd you do? Tell him just to call you your number or what?
I gave him my number and stuff.
Okay.
I'm gonna call him again.
But okay, Nikki, where's the number that I gave you? What's the number?
1 second.
Yeah? Oh, hold on, let me see. Let me check the card. Hold on, I think that's the wrong number, Nikki.
Oh.
Okay. I don't know where you got that number, Nikki. It doesn't come. 36. Okay, it's 81. Are you ready?
Ready, 1 second. 1 second. 1 second.
Yeah. Did you hear the guy's, the detective's name on the voicemail?
813.
Yeah. 365. The other number you called, was there not a voicemail? Somebody's name on there?
I heard something called Messer. I thought it was like Detective Messer.
Okay. All right, we'll call this number because maybe I gave you the wrong number, but that's the number I got on the card. So call this number right. Hey, call him right now, Nikki, so we can put an end to this. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, a lot has been talked about throughout this trial of Nicole Nachman's thought processes, the way of talking, and the things that she said to people after this offense. I submit to you that the best evidence of Nicole Nachman's thought process are those statements on those calls less than 12 hours after she murdered her mother. She has absolutely no trouble answering the questions. His name is Detective Messer. This is the phone number I called. I left a voicemail. She gets the number back from him. She gives the address of where she is, what dorm she's staying in. She follows along in a logical manner, having that conversation with both Eric Lear and Detective Messer. That is the best evidence of what's going on in Nicole Nachman's mind, closest in time to when she committed these crimes. And what does she say? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, no, I'm not. Nicole Nachman's fine. She's fine with what she's done. But she knows that she shouldn't be. She has the thought to know, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't act like I'm fine. What else does she say? Less than 12 hours after she killed her mother. Well, you know, she had a lot of people who didn't like her. She's already thought, the police are investigating me, they're on the phone with me, I gotta try and put this on someone else. Those are conscious thoughts of a murderer. She knows what she did, and she's gotta try and play it off. You know, there are people that didn't like Mom, and you know, Mom and Robert, you know, they had issues too. These are things that she's already thought about in her mind. These are not disorganized, illogical thoughts. These are not hallucinations. After these phone calls that we've just heard, what else do we know happens that morning? At some point around 9 o'clock in the morning, she checks in with Christina Chiotti at Florida State. Ms. Chiotti reports that she seems fine. There's no obvious concern to her, that nothing seemed out of the ordinary. We also know from her roommates that she encountered later that morning at Florida State that she gave them various stories. Mom's in an accident. My mom just died. The police are coming to talk to me. We know that at some point on that morning, she also calls her best friend, Laura Hesmer, and says to her, thank you. Thank you for having been a good friend to me. She knows exactly what she's done and what's happening. And lastly, who do we know that she talks to on August the 21st? Joey Carey. Her most trusted confidant, her best friend. What does she tell Joey? In a whisper. I did it. I shot them. I shot Mom and Bob. I didn't think I could, but I shot Bob. And when she first gets on the phone with Joey, before she even admits to what she's done, I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss you, Joey. Because she knows what she's done and she knows she's going away for it. I'm gonna miss you. Nicole, why are you gonna miss me? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Oh, gosh, no. No, that's not what I'm thinking about. That's what she says to Joey Carey. There are no suicidal thoughts in her mind when she talks to Joey. You thinking about hurting yourself? No, I wouldn't do that. I shot them. And what does Joey say? She's proud of herself. She actually sounds like she's proud of it. And he continues to talk to her. What else does she say? You can call me a beast, but don't call me a monster. And what's one of the last things she says? If only I would have gotten the news earlier, I wouldn't have had to do it. If only she would have gotten the news about her housing earlier, she wouldn't have had to set the trap that she set for her mother to walk right into so that she could kill her and eliminate her from her life. And eliminate the way that she hampered Nicole from living the life the way she wanted to live it. Eliminate her from the picture. And she killed Robert first for no reason but that he stood in her way of executing her plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not unsympathetic to mental illness. And it is not disputed that Nicole Nachman has a mental illness. But her mental illness did not justify the execution-style murders of Robert and Miriam Deans between August the 18th and August the 20th of 2015. And based on that, we are asking that you find her guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Thank you.
Ms. Garcia, so Bulgaria?
Thank you, Judge.
Members of the jury, you've now heard all the evidence. And what you've heard are two very different pictures of what the Deans and Lear family was like, about the household and environment that Nicole Nachman grew up in. The state tried to paint a picture, and I emphasize the word tried, of a happy home in Carrollwood that involved a roof, a pool, shelter, food, material things. But the picture that was painted and supported by the evidence was that of a very different environment. The accurate picture that was painted during this trial, documented by family members, documented by teachers and school psychologists, testified to by people who encountered Nicole Nachman in college, people who saw Nicole on a daily basis and made observations throughout her entire life. And the accurate picture that was painted in this trial is an environment that was riddled with abuse, primarily psychological abuse, which impacted Nicole Nachman and led to her developing a severe mental illness. What we ask is that you ask yourselves these very two important questions. If everything was so perfect as the state has tried to suggest these past 2 weeks, then why are we here? Ask yourselves this question. Do happy and perfectly normal children, teenagers, college students, wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to shoot my parents today for no reason whatsoever? Does that make sense? Happy, loved, developed teenagers, college students wake up one morning and say, you know what, I'm going to execute my plan as the state wants you to believe and shoot my mother and my stepfather for no reason whatsoever. What caused this happy, fun-loving child that everybody testified to in this trial, even the state's witnesses, to go from this? During jury selection, Ms. Holt emphasized the importance of not formulating any opinions or conclusions until you heard all of the evidence. Each and every one of you were promised or were selected because you promised her you would do that. The state told you in their opening statement that when this case began, that Nicole's mom was providing her everything. Room, board, college, computers. And so because Nicole Nachman just didn't want to face responsibility, she shot her mom. Members of the jury, if it was that simple, we wouldn't be here. If it was that simple, you wouldn't have sat through 2 weeks of testimony and evidence. Now, the state did acknowledge in their opening statement that Nicole Nachman did not have an easy life. But what the state has refused to acknowledge through this entire trial is that Nicole Nachman was not a normal college student. The state has made every attempt to paint this perfect picture that just isn't supported by the evidence. Despite what the state attempted to show you in their case, you've now been provided with the entire picture of Nicole Nachman's life. A childhood that began with a custody battle, turmoil between her biological mother and biological father. A childhood that ended with her being ripped at the age of 3 from her biological father
and never having contact with him again until she was arrested. A child who at the age of 3 not only gets ripped from her biological father's life, but at the same time, and why this is important, Joseph Carey runs away. Remember, Nicole Nachman's 3, Joseph Carey is about 15, and they're 12 years apart. Now again, the state made every attempt to minimize what running away is. I even think Mr. Terry asked Joseph Carey, well, you didn't really run down the street, right? You just got out of the car and left. He left the state of Virginia and moved to Florida to be in the comfort of his grandmother, his uncles, and the family that loved and supported him. He left his school in Virginia. He left his friends in Virginia. He left his mother's home because he could not deal with the stress and turmoil that was surrounding him at that time. He told you, I ran away because my mom was divorcing my biological father, and the custody battle between Ronald Nachman and my mother had become unbearable. That's what he told you. Guess who else he left? His 3-year-old sister to fend for herself. At the time, his brother Kevin was still alive. Because remember, Kevin doesn't die until 2003. The brother he said he was the closest with, they were a year apart in age. And Joseph Carey felt the need to get out of that house. He never went back. He told you he stayed in Florida with his grandmother until he graduated from high school, and then he joined the military. That is not the perfect environment the state has tried to suggest. We can get into word games about what the word runaway means, but I think the evidence speaks for itself. Joseph Carey, at the age of 14 or 15, made the conscious decision to leave his mother's home and never go back. Why is that important? Because Joseph Carey never lives in the same house again with Nicole Nachman and their mother after she's 3. He's not in the home when she's 4. He's not in the home when she's 5. He's not in the home when she's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And then in 2003, when Kevin dies, Nicole is literally by herself with her mother. So what did Joseph Carey tell you about his mother? She was tough. She would belittle us. She would say her children are a disgrace to her. She constantly focused on Nicole's weight. She fat shamed her. She made her get liposuction. Despite the fact that every single person who knew Nicole her entire life said she was never overweight. To him, those weren't a big deal, because that's just how mom was. He wasn't there every day. But members of the jury, you're not here to interpret how Joseph Carey may have interpreted his mother's actions. You're not here to determine whether Joseph Carey was physically or psychologically abused. You're not here to examine how Miriam Deans' actions affected Joseph Carey. You're here to determine how they affected Nicole Nachman. I anticipate the state's going to get up here and tell you Nicole wasn't beaten every day. Neighbors never reported yelling or fighting. The police were never called. She never had to go to the doctor. Even Dr. Heidi told you, this isn't the worst case of physical abuse that I've seen. But what did she say was the definition of psychological and verbal abuse? Her definition, the renowned expert in the field, says, words that wound. She then defined psychological abuse are words and behaviors that undermine a child's sense of self and safety in the world. Members of the jury, if this doesn't undermine a child's sense of self, I don't know what does. To someone like Nicole Nachman, who from an early age, as the records indicated, had been picked on in school, bullied, never able to make friends, never able to fit in, having attended 13 different schools in 13 years of school, because you can only go to school from 5 to 18. Kindergarten, you're about 5, you graduate high school in 18. 13 years and 13 different schools. Nicole needed a safe environment to come home to. She needed somewhere where her mother would protect and love her, not beat her down, and not damage her self-esteem even more. Miriam Dean's fat comments, fat shaming, you need LASIK, you need lipo, weigh yourself. Let's talk about these text messages, and this is State's Exhibit 70. You can go to page 335. You need to weigh yourself to get an idea where you are. At 5 feet, you should be 100 pounds. Add 5 pounds for every 1 inch after that. Get Bob to determine your height. So now Bob's involved. Those words, those actions by Miriam Deans for Nicole Nachman were just as traumatizing as Miriam Deans just got a baseball bat and beat her with it every day. Dr. Heidi told you the most significant thing about words that wound and psychological abuse is when it comes from a parent. Your own mother. That's what makes it so damaging. How do we know the traumatizing effect Miriam Deans' actions and words had on Nicole? You saw a video of it yesterday. To this day, 4 years after her mother's death in 2019, she still sobs and bawls when she's talking about her mother. And she's describing these instances of abuse. In 2019, you saw on that video, it's like she's reliving it every time she has to talk about it. You saw it. I'd submit to you that's about the most genuine piece of evidence you've seen. The state has tried to minimize the abuse, minimize the traumatizing effect that it had on Nicole Nachman. But that video speaks for itself. Dr. Heidi explained to you the 12 characteristics which are common in severely abused kids who kill their parents. She talked about the 12 characteristics with you, just to name a few: the pattern of family violence, the youth's attempt to obtain help from others fail, the youth's efforts to escape the family situation via suicide attempts, possibly running away. The youth is isolated. Home life becomes increasingly intolerable. The youth feels trapped and helpless. The youth loses control due to their inability to cope. The youth has no criminal history. A gun is available. And after the parent's death, it's a relief. These aren't 12 characteristics like Dr. Heidi came up with after evaluating Nicole Nachman. These came out of a thoroughly researched book she authored several years ago. And guess who else agreed that those are common characteristics found in severely abused children who kill their parents? The state's doctor. Also keep in mind that by all accounts, Joseph Carey was stronger and more equipped to deal with his mother. He was able to stand up to her and run away as fast as he could from Virginia. He's now in the military with a family, successful. He was stronger and more equipped than Nicole Nachman ever was. He ran away and never looked back. This is the same person who immediately after Nicole Nachman's arrest, or prior to her arrest, but as he's talking to her on the phone, wants to call her immediately to make sure she's not going to harm herself. Who immediately after she's arrested contacts the family and says, we need to help her. We need to get her a lawyer. Because in his mind, he knew something had to have driven his sister to do this. He tells Nicole Nachman, when law enforcement gets there, ask for a lawyer and do not talk. And what does she do? She does exactly what he tells her. A week after her arrest, or 2 weeks after her arrest, when he visits her in the jail, and you saw the video, he tells her, Nicole, do what makes you happy. Write in jail if you want. This person who had just killed his mother and shot her 3 times in a driveway, he's talking to and saying, Nicole, do what makes you happy. Don't worry about your weight. Don't worry about how you look in the mirror. Who now says 4 years later, if she had just called me, I would have helped her. If she had just called the family, they would have helped her. He saw how his mother treated his sister his entire life, the times he was around. He saw Nicole get liposuction. He saw changes in Nicole in middle school. She was being bullied. She wasn't the same. He told his mother. And so far, there's been absolutely no evidence that Miriam Deeds did anything. He saw how his mother belittled Nicole and called her fat. And he did nothing. When his mom said, oh, that's just the wrong friends, he accepted that. He'd take his sister in for a few weeks over the summer at his mom's request, but then send her back right to the same environment. Even the summer before this incident, in 2015, Nicole Nachman spent 3 weeks with him in Washington State. And he told you, I noticed problems with her hygiene. I would have to tell her to bathe. She was hiding food. I had to drag her out of the room to take her places. And what does he do when the summer break is over? Sends her back to the home of Miriam Deans. told you a story about something as silly as Nicole Nachman buying a sword at a Renaissance festival. And she was petrified of her mom finding out. Now, I don't want to minimize the tragedy that Joseph Carey suffered when his mother was killed. However, his failure to acknowledge what was happening to his sister her entire childhood must be considered by you in evaluating his credibility. So let's talk about the family members who did try to intervene, who did see signs of Nicole's mental deterioration and abuse by her mother. Let's start with George Lear, Miriam Deans' brother. Now again, I am in no way minimizing that these men lost their sister, tragically. And I'm sure common sense tells everyone that they did not want to come into this courtroom and disparage their sister. They had no motive to do that. They had no interest in the case. But what did George Lear tell you? In 21 years of Nicole Nachman's life, he saw Miriam Deans and Nicole be affectionate one time. Painting a house or something. Not at Christmas, not at Thanksgiving, not for a birthday party he may have attended for Nicole. One time in 21 years. George Lear wasn't just somebody who saw Nicole and Miriam every once in a while. He told you, I helped my mother with her. I would take her to school. I would drive her places. I would take her to the Air Academy or pick her up at the bus stop on the way back, on the way home on the weekends. I visited the apartment she lived in high school, where she lived by herself and slept on a mattress on the floor. So this wasn't somebody who was just seeing Nicole Nachman every once in a while. And in 21 years, he saw Miriam Deans and Nicole Nachman act like a mother and daughter should one time. More importantly, he told you about his observations about Nicole's fear of her mother. He told you that "don't tell mom" became the common phrase around the Lear house. Nicole's other uncle, Eric Lear, also told you. Same thing. Common sense tells us he didn't want to come in and disparage his sister. There's been no motive established on the part of Eric Lear. There's been no interest in how this case should be decided by anything that was brought out with Eric Lear. Eric Lear had the most contact, I'd say, out of all the brothers, or the uncles. Because he lived at his mother's home, Nicole's grandmother's home, off and on for periods throughout her childhood. He also told you he would drive his mother around because she didn't have a driver's license. So he spent a lot of time around Nicole during her childhood. His observations of Nicole are critical. From day one, when he spoke to the police, right after Nicole's arrest, he used the word bad. She looked like a battered woman. She looks like a battered woman. He described how she's unkept. He told you he told his sister his concerns, and she brushed them off and did nothing. That has been Eric Lear's testimony from the moment he talked to the police, in deposition, and in this week in trial. He told you about an incident at a of Miss Dairy Clay, or her mental state 4 years later in 2019, or even her mental state 2 hours after the incident. The law is clear. It's her mental state at the time of the offenses. Dr. Heidi, a renowned expert in the area of kids who kill parents. She's testified in 16 different states on the issue, evaluated 150 youths or young adults charged with violent crimes, published one of the leading authorities in this area. She told you that in over 30 years of being a college professor, she has never seen anyone as impaired as Nicole Nachman. She admitted to you this is not the most severe case of physical abuse I've ever seen. But that's not what's important. What's important is how the psychological and verbal abuse affected Nicole Nachman. How it affected her in terms of her development, her maturity, her ability to stick up to her mother, her ability to care for herself and navigate through college. The fact that Nicole Nachman wasn't beaten with a bat till she was unconscious in no way minimizes the traumatizing effect that that abuse had on her. Dr. Heidi repeatedly said during her testimony, when asked by Mr. Terry, it's not what a rational person would think or believe. It's what Nicole Nachman thought or believed. Nicole Nachman wasn't acting like a rational person in August of 2015. She had already been deteriorating, by all accounts, since her trip back from London in 2013. She was failing. She hadn't secured a dorm. She had lost her bike. Now, these things might sound trivial to most people, but you're not in the trial of most people. You're being asked to determine Nicole Nachman's state of mind. All of those stressors in Nicole's mind, and remember, Dr. Heidi continuously used the term child to describe Nicole. It was like she was a child. You saw evidence of her talking about snow cleaning. You saw Elsa books that she had. There's even, I think, a pair of Elsa blue slippers in one of the photos. This wasn't the mind of a normal 21-year-old. This was the mind of a child. While rational people, people without a mental illness who didn't get their dorm, may not think that's a huge deal. Rational people without a mental illness may not think failing out of college is a big deal. But in Nicole Nachman's mind, these stressors caused her to have a psychotic break. That's not me telling you. That's what the evidence and the mental health professionals told you. Dr. Heidi's observations and opinions, I'd submit to you, are critical. And the reason that is because she is the only mental health professional in this case that saw Nicole 8 days after her arrest. She told you that Nicole was still psychotic and delusional during her 6-hour evaluation of Nicole Nachman in September of 2015. The state has repeatedly made reference to the fact that Nicole is not a battered child. She's not abused because her mom provided for her basic needs. Members of the jury, those of us that are parents, know that parenting involves so much more than food and shelter. Parenting requires nurturing. It requires encouragement. It requires a safe environment that your child who's being bullied at school can come home to. I want you to look at the state's Exhibit 48, which is an evidence. It's the phone records that they introduced. They're not long. But they span the dates of August 2nd through August 12th, which is kind of that time frame just before these instances. I want you to count the number of times Nicole called her mother. She called her mother 44 times. Her mom called her 13 times. The state made a point to show these text messages, State's Exhibit 70. She was putting money in her bank. She was providing for Nicole. I'm not exactly sure how many pages there are, but you're going to have it back there. And I want you to look at those text messages and count how many times the word love is used by Miriam Deans. These text messages span a much longer period. They spanned January of 2015 until August of 2015. That's 8 months. I'll save you some time because there isn't one single text that has the word love in it from Miriam Deans to her daughter in 8 months. You're going to find one text that has the word love in it, and it was on June 30th, 2015, and it was Nicole telling her mother she loved her. You know what the response was? Nothing. Your daughter is away at school in Tallahassee, 4 hours away. And we got hundreds of pages here of text messages. Weigh yourself. Don't forget. Not one text message, Nicole, I love you. And when Nicole says, Mom, I love you, nothing. The state made a point to bring David Lear back yesterday. They introduced 3 photographs that David Lear apparently had accumulated. The first set of photographs were of Nicole. I think he said the oldest was about 3 or 4. And she's with her mom and she's happy. That has never been in dispute. That in her early years, she's smiling. But where are the pictures of Nicole Nachman and Miriam Deans at Christmas?
May we object? Approach bench?
Yeah, you approach, absolutely.
You provided about Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthday parties. The Rose, who lived next door and would hear or could see or hear the pool area of the Lear or the dean's residence. Never heard about any barbecues, Sunday family dinners. That's what a child needs from their mother. Love, encouragement, affection. Let's talk about the experts. The most important fact that you heard in this trial from all three mental health professionals is that Nicole falls on the schizophrenia spectrum of disorders. All three said it. Dr. Ewing told you that he evaluated Nicole and came up with his opinions before he read Dr. Heidi's report. So he does his evaluation, he reviews the history and records, and then, which is appropriate, I'm not going to review the opinions of another mental health professional until I myself have formulated mine. And they come with the same exact diagnosis of schizophrenia for Nicole. Their opinions that she's a battered child, again, coincide. They showed you in the DSM-5 the diagnostic criteria they used for that diagnosis. And they went through each and every criteria and how it applied to Nicole, which is what a psychologist or psychiatrist is supposed to do. They told you about the delusions, the hallucinations, the disorganized speech, the disorganized behavior, the negative symptoms, the inappropriate affect, the disturbed sleep pattern. But they didn't just come up with this opinion out of the sky. They based it on records, they based it on accounts by family, and they based it on accounts by the people in college who were observing Nicole close in time to these offenses. Angelica Henwood, Jackie Roman, Laura Hessemer, Eric Lear. They told you this was a gradual process of mental deterioration in Nicole Nachman. Dr. Ewing defined for you what auditory hallucinations are, and he provided authority in a medical journal that the screaming in her head from London is an auditory hallucination. So why is the state doctor the only one who came on the other side of that spectrum? So she's on that schizotypal, if you remember the diagram, to the left, and everybody else is on the right. Schizophrenia, the most severe mental illness in the field. I'll tell you why. Because she stands to lose the $480,000 she has received from their office in the last several years. If she says schizophrenia, she loses work. If she says schizophrenia, she loses her $480,000 she could then earn in the next several years. Now, I'd submit to you that no one in this courtroom is unsympathetic to children who are abused. But our job is to defend Nicole Nachman. But we had to ask Dr. Lazaro about her own childhood. It's not because we're not unsympathetic people. It's not because we don't recognize how important child abuse is. We've been talking about it for 2 weeks. But we had to ask her because in a case involving child abuse, where she says our client is not battered or not abused, her childhood is absolutely relevant. You know why? Because in Dr. Lazaro's mind, she turned out fine. She was abused, but she became a doctor. Not everyone's like Dr. Lazaro. And that's why we had to bring it out. Because her bias is based on her own experiences, not those of Nicole Nachman. One of your fellow jurors in jury selection said it perfect. When we were talking about mental illness and Ms. Holt was questioning the panel, one juror says you have to look at the individual. Not everybody had the genetic makeup Nicole Nachman did. Not everybody had the low self-esteem Nicole Nachman did. You have to look at the individual. Let's talk a little bit about what the state doctor told you yesterday. She was asked if Nicole's account of her mother banging her head on a table was abuse. And her response was, if it was me, I would have just counseled the parent. A third grader who is being banged, her head is being banged on a table. Now she said, I don't dispute that that didn't happen. She's going to counsel the parent. She told you that Nicole just has a personality flaw. And that Miriam Deans just had a parenting style. You're fat. You need lipo. You're a skank. You need to weigh yourself. Kicking Nicole into a fireplace until she could feel it on her back. Nicole finding a gun and pills, and Miriam's response is to show her how to use the gun. I'm not sure what kind of parenting style that is. It's abuse. If you believe the state doctor's characterization of discipline and abuse, and she testified to it at the very beginning, what she basically said is, it's discipline and not abuse as long as it's in response to something the child does. So according to the state doctor, if a child takes the car, runs away, uses drugs, and a parent beats them over the head with a bat, that's not abuse because it's in response to something the child did. That's what she told you yesterday. I'm also not sure which record she reviewed. Because what she testified to yesterday is not what you heard in this courtroom. She told you that a roommate said Nicole was capable of caring for herself in college, she just chose not to. Unless I was in a different courtroom this week and last week, I missed that. Because every single person that encountered Nicole Nachman in college that testified in this courtroom said she could not care for herself. I had to throw her mattress outside. I had talks with her, and she wasn't getting it. She told you yesterday that Joey Carey said that when Nicole stayed with him that summer in Washington prior to these offenses, that she could care for herself. Again, I must have missed that. Because Joseph Carey said I had to tell her when to bathe. I had to drag her places. She was sneaking food. The state doctor, however, did use words like aggressive, demeaning, when describing how Miriam Deans talked to Nicole Nachman. But just said, I just didn't agree with her parenting. She also said, it's not my judgment to make. You were hired to determine if Nicole Nachman was abused and suffered from battered child syndrome, and it's not your judgment to make as to the parenting Miriam Deans exhibited. She testified Nicole is a meek person. that Miriam Dean's words were clearly hurtful to Nicole. So I guess if you decide to believe or give credence to the state doctor, her opinion is that Nicole Nachman killed both of her parents because she didn't fit in, she liked to binge eat, she liked to overspend, and it was just a personality flaw. The state doctor knew before she ever went and saw Nicole Nachman that doctors were saying she had schizophrenia. She knew that they had opined that Nicole was insane at the time of these offenses. She knows what the diagnostic criteria is for schizophrenia. She had the benefit of Eric Lear's deposition, who said, I saw her talking to herself. But her answer yesterday was, I just didn't ask Nicole about it. You've been given a diagnosis of schizophrenia. You know that delusions and hallucinations are part of the criteria to diagnose somebody. And your answer to that question is, I didn't ask Nicole about it? I'll let you make sense of that. I think the question many have asked is, why Robert Deans? I go back to my original statement when I stood up here earlier. Kids, teenagers, college students, they don't kill their parents for no reason. They don't wake up one day with a master plan, as the state has tried to suggest, to kill their parents. What do we know about Robert Deans? Not a single person in the Lear family knew anything about him. If he ever went to Miriam Deans' mother's home, Nicole's grandmother's home, maybe once, Joseph Carey, Miriam Deans' son, met him or hung out with him or spent time with him 4 times in their 11-year marriage. When they got married in 2004, Nicole would have been 8 years old. There was no testimony from a single witness that there was ever family dinners that Robert Deans attended, Christmases, Thanksgivings. None of the photos that you've seen have Robert Deans and Nicole in them. In all those times you heard Miriam Deans was deployed or had to work, not once did anyone say Nicole stayed with him. She lived in an apartment by herself in high school while Robert Deans lived in Carrollwood. She slept on a mattress. What Robert Deans did is he failed to protect Nicole from her mother. At the age of 8, when he entered Nicole's life, children bond with their step-parents. You heard Wesley Rowe, the neighbor, talk about his stepdaughter, Elizabeth. In fact, he called her daughter and then had to correct himself and said stepdaughter. Within this very trial, you saw evidence of what a stepfather and stepdaughter's relationship should be. That is not the case with Robert Deans and Nicole Nachman. A retired police officer who was in the military did nothing to protect Nicole. In fact, that text message I just referenced, where Miriam Deans says, "Have Bob weigh you." Step-parents have a duty to protect their children, just like biological parents, just like adopted parents. And the final thing I want to say about Robert Deans is somebody who is in their right mind doesn't sit in a house for 24 hours with the decomposing body of her stepfather if everything is just perfect. Ms. Derry addressed the law of premeditation with you, and I want to talk about that for purposes of first-degree murder. They're suggesting to you that this was some sort of master plan by Nicole Nachman. The same person who you heard couldn't navigate the jail visitation from Dr. Heidi, couldn't figure out what to do when her bike went missing, talked about the Snow Queen to Detective Messer, forgot to get housing even though she was an upperclassman. So she'd done it before, or it had been done before for her. So this master plan, as they want you to believe, to support premeditation, was, as they stated, shooting Bob in the head, wrapping him in a comforter, and then dragging him into a bedroom. Now what? This master plan of shooting her mother in the driveway where neighbors and people can hear gunshots and call the police. This master plan of driving to Tallahassee and checking into the very dorm that everyone knew she was headed to or was supposed to be at. And then on the phone call Miss Derry played for you, telling Detective Messer her address of where he can come find her. Detective Messer in that phone call that was played for you earlier even says, "I'm surprised you answered." She answers the phone and says, "I just don't know my exact address because she's moving in and doesn't know the dorm," which is not unreasonable. Looks it up and gives him the exact place he can find her. Oh, and then let me go to my cousin David's house and borrow money and tell him exactly where I'm going to be too so the police can find me there. Now, the state made a big deal throughout this trial about the car down the street, laying in wait, the GPS coordinates. But Elena Rowe, the neighbor, told you that when she went out for a run that night, she saw Nicole Nachman's car parked right in front of their house at 8:15 p.m. because she almost walked into it. Now, the state attempted to say, well, you didn't tell the police that. And what did she tell you? I couldn't get into my house. And my family was telling me they heard gunshots. I was thinking about a few other things than whether I saw Nicole Nachman's car or not. But as soon as she did, she reported it. The law also says that anything Nicole may have done after the fact. All these things Miss Derry spent a significant amount of time talking to you about, cleaning up, putting things in the washer. Remember this, because the law says you cannot consider what happened after the offenses to determine premeditation. That's very, very important to remember. What Nicole Nachman did after shooting Robert Deans and Miriam Deans cannot be considered at all by you on the issue of premeditation. Because premeditation is something that happens before. Members of the jury, you were chosen in this case because in jury selection, we asked each and every one of you if you could consider mental illness, if you could consider abuse, if you could consider the defense of insanity, if you could consider the defense of justifiable use of deadly force. And each and every one of you promised us you would. So what do we have to establish for insanity? You've seen this already, but just to review. A person is, first of all, the first sentence is very important. It's whether Nicole Nachman was insane when the crime allegedly was committed. A person is considered to be insane when she had a mental infirmity, disease, or defect. We already know that nobody disputes number one exists. Even the state doctor says she's mentally ill. And two, because of this condition, she did not know what she was doing or its consequences. And there you stop. You don't need to read any more into B, because that's not what we're proceeding under. And that's why there's an or there. It's A or B. Now, the state elicited testimony yesterday about did she know it was wrong to kill somebody? That's prong B, and that's not for your consideration. So let's talk about the evidence in the case that shows that Nicole Nachman did not know what she had done or its consequences. Detective Messer himself said that he arrives at the Florida State University Police Department to question Nicole Nachman about 2 counts of first-degree murder. She already knows he's coming. You heard the phone call. And she's exactly where they find her. He's about to question her about the killing of her parents. And within minutes of walking into the room, Nicole Nachman starts telling him about the Snow Queen. He even stops her at one point and says, "You know your mom is dead, right? You know Bob is dead, right?" Her response is, "Yeah, I'm just trying to distract myself," and goes right back to talking. Now, Detective Messer didn't want to admit the first time when I asked him until I confronted him with his deposition. But in his mind, he believed she was not grasping what was happening. Now, the state contends that that video somehow portrays something else. But Detective Messer was in the room. And he told you, as he previously did in a deposition under sworn testimony, that she was not grasping what was happening. She was not grasping the seriousness of the situation. What other evidence do you have to suggest that Nicole Nachman did not know the consequences of what she had done? She told Dr. Heidi that there were 4 possibilities or resolutions to her case. 1, she could be tortured. 2, she could be banished from society. 3, she would donate money to all of you all's choice for a charity. 4, she would keep a journal of her behavior. And then finally, she used the term 4, but then she followed up and said she wanted to join the military. What did she tell her brother in the jail visit? "I'm going to buy you Christmas presents when I get out." This is a 21-year-old who has low personality development, is immature, is psychotic, is mentally ill, and she is not grasping what she had done or its consequences. Now, Ms. Holt discussed this in jury selection, but I want to bring it up because there's 2 different burdens in this case. And we talked at length during jury selection about the burden of proof. And that as to the elements of premeditation and the elements of first-degree murder, the burden of proof by the state of Florida is beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt. But our burden for insanity is much lower, and that's in the instruction. It's by clear and convincing evidence. It's right here in this paragraph. It defines what clear and convincing evidence is. Remember, it's not beyond and to the exclusion of all reasonable doubt like they must prove to you for first-degree murder. Clear and convincing evidence is evidence that is precise, explicit, lacking in confusion, and of such weight that it produces a firm belief without hesitation about the matter and issue. You had two trained, credible mental health professionals telling you that they believe Nicole Nachman was insane at the time of these offenses, and unlike the state doctor, based those opinions on fact and evidence. Mental illness affects people differently. Insanity at the time of the offense doesn't mean Nicole Nachman needs to sit here in a straitjacket. Dr. Ewing told you about a colleague of his who was a Yale Law School graduate and professor who suffers from schizophrenia. But what Dr. Ewing told you is what Nicole suffers from is the most severe mental illness there is. You have been asked to make a very important decision in this case, and that's whether Nicole Nachman is not guilty by reason of insanity. I want to read you the bottom of this instruction that the judge is going to tell you. It's the last paragraph. If your verdict is that the defendant is not guilty by reason of insanity, that does not necessarily mean she will be released from custody. I, the judge, must conduct further proceedings to determine if the defendant should be committed to a mental hospital or given other outpatient treatment or released. The law says that is not for your consideration what happens to Nicole after this trial. You're to determine if you believe she had a mental disease or defect and that because of schizophrenia, she didn't know what she was doing or its consequences. That's it. Judge Sabella, who has presided over this case, who has heard all the evidence and all the facts, will take all of that into consideration in determining what happens with Nicole Nachman should you find her not guilty by reason of insanity. So do not let that cloud your judgment. On the issue of insanity, the state made a point to say that Nicole Nachman told her brother, "I'll miss you." She hugged David and said goodbye. She told Laura, "You've been a good friend." I submit to you that that was her suicidal thoughts. You heard evidence that, in fact, during this entire ordeal, she's suicidal. She's contemplating killing herself. She's contemplating what she's going to do about housing. She is psychotic and delusional. Members of the jury, if you apply what you've heard these past 2 weeks, and I mean everything you've heard, all of the witness accounts, her childhood, the records, the college students, the family, the mental health experts, the credible ones. The only verdict supported by the facts, the law, and the evidence is one of not guilty by reason of insanity as to both counts. Because when Nicole Nachman shot Robert Deans and Miriam Deans, she was psychotic, she was delusional, she was schizophrenic, and she did not know what she was doing or its consequences. Thank you.
Sir, so can I get you to move the thing just so I can ask the jury? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, You've been sitting there for 2 hours now. We're going to go to the state's rebuttal argument, but I just want to know if any of you need a quick restroom break or break to stretch your legs. I see, yes, okay. I sense more than enough. I only needed one. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break. Please do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not do any research related to the case, and please avoid any exposure to reports of the case outside the courtroom. All stand for the jury.